Welcome so much to Tap. Welcome to Tap In with us, everyone, and welcome to you, Paul Levy.
Yeah, hi, I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you for the invite.
You are a longtime student of the psyche. You are an author of many books, for example, the one we'll be speaking about today, The Quantum Revelation, a radical synthesis of science and spirituality. And I have some very important questions in my heart for you, and that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
interview, right? That's when it's something I really want to know. But first, I want to ask you because when I've been reading your presentation that you have on different websites, you also have that piece about being a wounded healer.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to just comment on that part of your presentation for people to get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So, because my background is really one of a kind in that, I had a normal, seemingly happy, healthy, sort of when I was a kid, a childhood. And then there was this incredible trauma, without going into the story. I'm an only child, and my father wound up really being a sick person, like a really bad guy in the sense that he just wasn't dealing with his own abuse and he just dealt with it by acting it out and completely being unwilling to self-reflect. And I was the recipient of that. So it created enormous suffering for me. And I'm talking when I was in college, when I was individuating and separating. And the pain and the suffering was so intense that I went from being a happy, healthy, highly functioning, kid or young adult to someone who couldn't even take the next step. I was so overwhelmed with suffering, and I dealt with it by going inwards, by just assuming the position of the witness and seeing what was happening. And after a couple of years of doing that, I had this huge life transforming spiritual awakening. There's a whole story I won't go into, but within hours, I got myself in trouble. I got immediately thrown in mental hospitals and diagnosed, oh, you're bipolar and you'll have this illness the rest of your life and you'll need to be on medication. And I knew they had no idea what they were talking about. And that's what saved me. But to answer your question, that was in 1981 when I had the awakening. So it's been over 40 years. And I've had this incredible wound and trauma that I was committing my whole life to, oh, I was going to heal this. And then at a certain point, I realized, what if it never goes away? And then I began to realize, oh, there's a way of holding the wound where it becomes a portal to your deeper gifts. And so I still feel that incredible wound or trauma, but instead of seeing it as problematic, and this is the archetype of the wounded healer. They suffer an incurable wound, but instead of it being them becoming absorbed in it or identified with it or seeing it as problematic, they're able to carry it in a way where it becomes a doorway for their creative gifts. And that's very much having to do with the figure of the shaman, who is the wounded healer, who is the storyteller, the dreamer, and the creative artist. And so for years, I was like, well, how do I identify myself? And once I learned about the wounded healer figure, I'm like, oh, that's me. I'm really embodying that archetype. And one of the major things, the final part that I want to share is that when you're a wounded healer, you're so intimately familiar and comfortable with your own wounding and darkness that when you work with other people and they're sharing their woundedness and their trauma, instead of just, kind of unconsciously trying to fix them, you're able to just be present with them in their suffering because you've developed that muscle in yourself to presence your own suffering. And that, I think, is part of the healing.
That is a wonderful way of putting it. I'm very much into that archetype for the same reason, I guess, as you, as I feel identified with it in a personal way. But what you just said is then you know your own wound in such a way that you don't want to fix it anymore. It's what I'm hearing, because then you don't want to
Yeah.
fix you're also just present with whatever has been, but and then that takes you to that portal. But I mean, are we who identify with that archetype more wounded than other people, do you think?
Yeah, well, wait, I didn't hear that last part of the, what was the last sentence you said?
Do you think that we are more wounded than other people?
No, I think my sense is that we're all wounded. We're a species in trauma, but the wounded healer, I think, is somebody who's adding consciousness to their being wounded. where like so many other people just compartmentalize it and then they're split. Then they're in a disassociated state. They're not connected with their wholeness. And any inkling of their wound, they just chronically repress. And so my sense is we're all wounded. How can it's like being a car in the life of a car, you get dents. We're all like we have these wounds, but the wounded healer is somebody instead of trying to adapt to an insane society and just, sweep under the carpet their wounds, they're able to, be present with it in such a way that a curative power arises. And that curative power is the creative spirit. That I think what makes the wounded healer different.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, and that is very touching about what you just said before. That, yeah, I know it's 40 years ago. You've shared this a lot, but just when you said it right now, it touched me that you said, and I knew that they were wrong. I knew that they didn't understand.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I just want to say it was so clear in my own process. It couldn't have been made more clear to me that I was having a spiritual awakening. And here were these people who had no idea what my experience was and who were just incredibly entranced in this limited scientific materialist point of view. And they're claiming to be more authorities on my experience than I was. It was insane. And I just thought, oh my God, they're incredibly ignorant, they're stupid, they're asleep, they have no idea what they're talking about, but yet they're in the role of the authority. And I just had to navigate that. But me having that certainty saved my life.
Mhm. I'm just looking at the sound to be sure. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
can
good.
hear you. Yeah.
Good. I get nervous about these things, but I really would just want to surrender to the conversation and not have to worry about technical stuff. So let's get
Yeah.
into the first question that I have for you. I've been listening to, this is what people can do out there if they haven't yet. They can now listen to the Quantum Revelation, your book on audiobook. I can also read it, of course, but it's also nice as I mean, a very informative meditation, if you want to put it like that. It's been really, really cool to listen to. And so I've made a note of a few things, and a very important one is a question that you raise in the book yourself. That is what the difference between that new age, you can create your own reality, and then what you talk about with the effect of what we call the quantum.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, sure.
take
So
as long time you can to explain it, because I know it's a big theme.
yeah, 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 no, totally. You see, okay, so I'll start off with quantum, just encapsulating really succinctly, what makes quantum physics so amazing. So, it came into the world, it was discovered or created, depending on your point of view, about a century ago when quantum physics came into this world and into physicists' minds. And basically they discovered that the world that they were exploring and trying to understand didn't even exist in the way they had imagined it did. In other words, that this world didn't exist as an object. They just thought that, pre-quantum physicists, oh, this world is objective, it's separate from us, and we're just trying to study it and understand it. And then quantum physics came along and empirically proved again and again that that's a nonsensical idea that has no correlate in reality. It's only an idea that exists within your mind. That, and not only that, but that the act of observation actually influences the universe that we're observing. That the act of observation is a key factor in the equation of the universe is another way of saying that. That's the rabbit hole. And when you really, and what I did in the book is go down that rabbit hole as deeply as I could. And what it's basically showing us is that this is a collective dream. That's I'm pointing out, I'm not a physicist, and the traditionally academically corporately trained physicists aren't prepared because quantum physics is, I don't know any physicist who doesn't say it's the most absolutely incredible discovery ever in the history of the world in the realm of science. Nobody disagrees with that, at least as far as I know. But there's a huge controversy on, well, what does it mean? And I'm not a physicist, and I'm saying, oh, what it means, it's actually proving, it's showing us. It's showing us that we're having a collectively shared dream. And, the act of observation influencing the universe that we're observing, that's a description of a dream. Like, and you change the way you're viewing the dream instantaneously has to shapeshift, because the dream is nothing other than a reflection of your own mind. That's what quantum physics has tapped into. And what that means is that the act of observation is creative. Okay. And what that means is that we, for the most part, unconsciously have this enormous unconscious creative power that is our nature. But to the extent that we're unconscious of it, in a way, we outsource it to the world, and then we become victimized by the world because we're not in touch with our own creative power and agency. Now, then there's the new age thing of, oh, you're just creating, however, whatever they say. And I get so triggered by that, because 99.9% of the time, the people are still unconsciously, they're pointing at the ego. Oh, you're just creating this. Oh, you have cancer. Oh, just uncreate it. And there's still, because we all have, in a way, this like hangover. I call it an objective reality hangover. As soon as we think the world objectively exists, simultaneously, we're conjuring ourselves up as a subject that's in relationship to the objective world. That subject is the ego. And our subjective sense of ego and our imagination that the world exists objectively, they reinforce each other. It's a feedback loop, that as soon as we think the world exists objectively, well, then we're a subject. And if we're a subject, the world is an object. And they, like I'm saying, they endlessly, self-generate each other. That's the illusion that quantum physics just blew out of the water. And so I would say to those new age people, who's the I that you think is creating your experience? Because it's not, if you're identified even subtly with a reference point in third dimensional space and time, with a separate self, with an ego, then you're under illusion. So quantum physics, and some of the founding fathers of quantum physics, they were saying, one of the most profound things about quantum physics, it's shedding light on who are we. And one of them even said, yeah, we might have to change our definition of what we mean by a who. Who are we? That's where I point out that quantum physics is actually unwittingly promoting itself to be a spiritual path, because it's pointing out that we, if we're not a separate self, if we don't exist as an ego, if we're actually interrelated to the universe, and that as we observe it, we're actually influencing the universe that we're experiencing, we are creating our experience. But who's that we? Who's that I? That's what quantum physics has proven, that each of us are creating our experience by the way we interpret what's happening to us and the meaning we place on it. But that's not the separate self that's doing that. That's a deeper part of us. And being like a dream, whatever we project onto the waking ink blot, then that just gets immediately reflected back, in a way, giving us the evidence that what we're saying is objective. So then we even get more fixed in our viewpoint, thinking it's objective. And then we get more fixed in our viewpoint, thinking that we're a subject in relationship to the objective world. But when you discover there's no objective world, what happened to the subject? I, as a subject, I need to have an object to be in relationship with in order to be a subject. When there's no object, which is what quantum physics has proven, who am I? That's where it's like actually shedding light on who we actually are, not just this made up fictitious, oh, I'm creating the universe and I'm creating, what happens to me. No, if you're even subtly identified with a separate self, you're completely under an illusion. And that illusion, the physicist David Bohm, he talks about this. He calls this is an illusion generating illusion. It just endlessly generates a whole host of other illusions. But the primary illusion, there are two ways of saying it, is that I exist as a separate self, or that the universe exists separate and objective from me.
Yes, so that's the answer. That's great. Oh, and I mean, you repeat this in the book, that it is something that we're not trained to think this way, right? So we have to have some patience with that reprogramming, and like, oh, this is a different
Well, if
path.
I could just say, like, the discoveries, the revelations, because quantum physics is a revelation. It's so profound, it's so radical that, people who study this say it typically takes a number of centuries for people to really, take online what the revelation is showing us. And, quantum physics has already changed the whole history of our world with all the technology, with lasers and computers and transistors and all that. And these people who study this say that's just the low-hanging fruit, that the real essence, the real transformation that quantum physics is going to catalyze is within our mind, is the way we think, and that's what I'm trying to point out. Because in essence, what quantum physics has discovered, you see, the founding fathers kept on saying, we still don't have the central idea. What is the main idea of quantum physics? We still don't understand it. And an example they use, say, if you've never seen an automobile and you come across an automobile and you like, oh, wow, what is this thing? And you turn the turn signals, you turn the wheel, you turn on the radio, it has a heater, but you still don't get the central idea, right? The founding fathers are saying we don't get the central idea, that it's so simple that we should be able to put it on a bumper sticker or on a t-shirt in 5 words, something like that. And here I am, I'm not a physicist, and in a sense, that's to my benefit because I haven't been sort of like programmed in a certain way. And I'm just saying, hey, quantum physics is proof. It's showing us that we are dreaming, that we are literally having a collectively shared dream. And as more of us take that on board into our minds, then we discover that, yeah, we can actually change the waking dream we're having. And that's evolutionary. You see, quantum physics is revealing to us, it's the medicine. I have a lot of books I've written on the mind virus, on the Watiko mind virus, that's at the root of the evil and the madness that our species is playing out. And quantum physics is the medicine. Quantum physics is showing us, it's offering us, it's freely offering us what the gift is in the seeming poison. And what my whole work is about and what that book is about is trying to like open people's eyes to that, and then the one final thing, the physicists, the founding fathers say, when we actually get the central idea of what quantum physics is showing us, they imagine we're going to hit our heads and go, how could I have been so blind for so long? And that's exactly it. This is staring us in the face. The revelation is so obvious, but people just don't see it in a way because they don't know that their eyes can see. And here I am just pointing out, look, it's literally showing us we're having a collective dream. And to the extent we're unconscious of that, we're dreaming up a nightmare. We think about all the horrors that are happening all over the world. And yet encoded in the nightmare is actually the vaccine, is actually the medicine. Because quantum physics is in a literal way helping us to remember who we are, helping us to wake up to our circumstance, which is that we're having a collective dream. And instead of just waiting 300-400 years for us to begin to understand this, I'm just somebody who's trying to translate as a non-physicist, going, look, this is like we already have the revelation. We're in possession of it. We are the revelation. And when enough of us have that realization, that's when we can really, that's when we can evolve and change things.
And I'm glad that you have taken that upon yourself, first of all, and came out to someone like me. You're reaching a lot of people with this, and I think it is important, like you say, to become aware of it. The images that I get when you're talking is we also just have to get by, right? And these bigger universal themes, it can be hard. What does it mean for me? How is it this applicable? Because then you can maybe feel this expanded mind a little bit, like, whoa, this is out there. But then I also I have to earn money, and I have to get up every day, and
Yeah.
so making it tangible is important. And that's why I'm really curious about this question, how it's different from saying you can change your reality, for example, by the way that you think, and to what you're saying around the quantum, because there's something about it, right? We You're saying that it's a collectively shared dream, meaning we can wake up from it. We can do something else. We can affect reality. Can you say something more about that? It's completely selfish that I'm asking, right? It's like, I
Yeah,
want,
yeah, no, totally. Well, the thing is, you see, so quantum physics, you see, in the Cartesian, in the scientific materialist point of view, we've been conditioned to think that mind and physical matter are different, right? And by saying that quantum physics has proven that we're having a collectively shared dream, one other way of translating that is that it's showing us that mind and matter are not separable in this, ultimately speaking. In this, I have a bunch of chapters in the book about, synchronicity, and this really kind of helps us to contextualize these experiences of synchronicity, where all of a sudden something will happen in our actual outer life that's reflecting the very thing that's going on inside of our psyche, that the psyche and matter are not separate. And so what quantum physics is really about, they tried to understand what are the building blocks of this universe. And the more they went down in scale, the more they didn't find anything physical, they found consciousness, and the idea being that there's this radical difference. I mean, that's always the case, that consciousness is at the underlying matrix. And I have all these quotes from the founding fathers saying this in different ways, but there's a radical difference between when people aren't aware how their consciousness is affecting,
when you,
not only the world.
you say founding fathers, are you talking about Wheeler?
Wheeler, Schrodinger, Heisenberg, Einstein, Max Planck, Niels Bohr, people like that, And the historians say in the early part of the 20th century, there was an unbelievable group of these genius physicists, like the ones I just mentioned, that was really extraordinary. And they were the ones who stumbled upon quantum physics. And because up until that point, the physics community they were of the opinion, oh yeah, we figured out 99% of, stuff that to be figured out. There's very little else that we're really going to be like figuring out. And then quantum physics just completely blew that out of the water, and a lot of the physics community just tried to create a physics that would actually try to not deal with, what quantum physics had revealed. And the typical thing when a physicist would ask, like, what is the meaning of quantum physics? The traditional response is shut up and calculate. In other words, the typical physicists aren't really, interested in like the philosophical, metaphysical, like revelatory aspect of it. They just wanted to solve equations so that they could, create, better technology. But then there is Wheeler, for example, who is incredibly metaphysically oriented. And Einstein, who was one of the founding fathers, he even said his quantum physics is accurate and it's never been proven wrong in the slightest. He goes, that's the end of physics, and yeah, it's the end of physics as we know it, because physics as we know it was trying to understand the nature of the objective world. Well, there's no such thing. And thinking that we existed as a separate self. Oh, that's just a complete illusion. That illusion got blown out of the water, by quantum physics,
So we are collectively dreaming. I, what do I want to wake up? I want to affect my own reality. How do you work with that? How do you work with that in your own life?
Yeah, well, I mean, and this goes back to that experience I had 40 plus years ago, that I was immediately hospitalized and pathologized. And, the way, even back then, the way I was describing it is, oh my God, I was realizing we're all dream characters in each other's dreams. We're all like dreaming up moment by moment this universe into manifestation. And it was very much like being in a night dream and having lucidity and realizing, oh my God, this universe that I thought was real and objective and solid and separate from me, now I'm realizing its nature, that I'm actually not out of my mind, I'm inside my mind, I'm inside my psyche. And it's not hard to have that realization in a dream, But then if you don't stabilize it, it's very easy to get absorbed back in the forms of the dream and forget. And so, what I point out is that, yeah, in our life, like to answer your question, and even I think I'm a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, and one of the foundational practices, it's called pure perception. And what is pure perception? Oh, just imagine every moment of your day that you're in a dream that you've woken up in and you have lucidity in. And so, to become familiar with that viewpoint, that everything is actually your own energy, that there's nothing out there, that would really help, combined with, you see, in Buddhism, they say if it's true awakening, it's always two factors, a combination of two factors of, on the one hand, there's emptiness is what it's called in Buddhism, and the other it's compassion. They always co-join. Now, emptiness, that's lucidity. That's realizing, oh, there's nothing intrinsically, independently existing outside of my own consciousness. Like in the same way that like I'm in Portland, Oregon, and it rains here a lot, and oh, there's a rainbow. Well, and quantum physics is pointing out that the nature of this world is like a rainbow. What is that rainbow? There's three factors that make up a rainbow. There's light, there's water, and there's a mind. If either of those three factors are not there, there's no rainbow. So there's no objective rainbow. No, the image you're seeing of a rainbow is an image inside of your own mind. Quantum physics is saying exactly that's the nature of our universe. Everything we're seeing, it's not separate from awareness. Everything, okay? And so the point is that when you have that realization of emptiness to whatever degree, that's the lucidity. The energetic expression of that is compassion, is an open heart filled with love. That's our nature. And when those two, emerge together, that's the real awakening. And it's something that we can cultivate. We can cultivate to deepen that realization of, oh, yeah, let me do that pure perception practice and imagine that this is a dream that I've woken up in. And let me cultivate the open heart of compassion, and they actually support in a mutual way each other, the emptiness and the compassion. And then we more and more just embody that. And that becomes our kind of MO or our practice. And that, the result of that is we deepen our awakening and expand our consciousness and open our heart and access the infinite creative spirit that is our nature.
Mhm. Yeah, I think different things are running through my mind, because first I'm thinking, what about, I have to be there on time, and I have to, transportation, and it feels so real, right? eh, I relate to the physical world. The bus drives on this hour and I have to be there, the sort of
Right.
mindset is small. But then when you're talking about compassion, I feel, okay, it's actually maybe not about re-engineering so much my everyday life, because that's maybe from a very selfish or subjective point of view. And it's more about, yeah, cultivating compassion and then changing the whole. Am I getting that right, or is it
Yeah.
both?
Well, the thing is, too, I mean, like I think of my teachers, I've been really fortunate to have these great teachers for many years, and they embody, what I was just describing, being awake and compassionate and loving, and they're completely in the world, so they don't just like forget about, the practical mundane world. No, if the bus comes on a certain point and if they have to be somewhere, they're gonna make a point to be there, but they're not in a way, like so many people are just absorbed in the mundane practical world, thinking that that's all there is, where the whole time, in a way they're in the world but not of the world, but at the same time they're in touch with that, that transcendent deeper dream that they're a part of, that we're all a part of, and it's really being fluid between those two worlds of, in a way, the world that's dreamlike, that mystics are very in touch with, compared to the mundane ordinary world that we also have to honor and take care of.
Right. I see. Okay. I want to get to some of my questions here. The quantum as the inner teacher. You talk about that. The quantum as the inner teacher. Um, yeah, can you explain that first of all?
Yeah. Because, so what quantum physics discovered is that the nature of this universe on all scales is quantum, that this universe is quantum through and through. And, and it started out as an inquiry into the really small, but it also discovered even the macrocosm, even the really big, is quantum. And one simple way of understanding quantum, what the quantum is that it's showing, or it's an expression of the wholeness of this universe, that there's no separate parts interacting, but we're all in a seamless way interconnected and interdependent with everything. There's no separate parts or no separate things at all. And so I'll give you an example of the quantum being our teacher. Say if you're in a dream, in a night dream, right? So imagine you're in a night dream, and imagine you're holding a viewpoint in that night dream. Well, what is that night dream? It's just a reflection of your own mind. So whatever viewpoint you're holding is getting immediately reflected back in no time at all, giving you proof that your viewpoint is objective. And once you see that it's objective, you become even more fixed in the viewpoint. Oh, well, what I'm seeing is accurate, it's objective, I have all the evidence I need. So you get even more entrenched in your viewpoint of seeing the world objectively as separate from you. The more you do that, the more the world actually just will manifest objectively as if it's objective, giving you confirmation, endless proof and evidence that your viewpoint is correct. And what I'm describing, ad infinitum, that happens each and every moment. And basically, that's where we hypnotize ourselves. We've entranced ourselves by our own creative genius. But the whole thing, it's like showing us, it's teaching us. That's the quantum. It's showing us, oh, take a look at what you're doing. You've entranced yourself. You are doing this. No witch is doing this and casting a spell on you. You're casting a spell on yourself. Now, for example, in quantum physics, I point out that in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a tradition called the hidden treasure tradition, terma. And it's a real thing. It's the way the lineage I do practice to, the way it keeps itself fresh, where the idea is that there are these hidden treasures encoded in the multidimensional fabric of the universe. And then at certain moments, right when the community of practitioners gets off balance, one of these termas, these hidden treasures, will be discovered, and oftentimes they're planted in the disciples' minds. And when something will happen, that little door will open up and they'll have a revelation. And and it's actually not just for them, but it's for the whole community, whether it's a new practice or a vision or prayer or blessed object. And one way of understanding it, it's just like in a dream, when we get one-sided, dreams are compensatory. They show us the other side. So if a community gets off balance, all of a sudden they're like dreaming up the terma, the hidden treasure, to incarnate into physical manifestation to help them to remember to get back in balance. Now, I point out that quantum physics is a modern day analog to a terma. We collectively as a species have dreamed up quantum physics because we've gotten so like one-sidedly absorbed in the scientific materialist point of view, which has given us enormous technological power, but has an error in it and is actually insane, actually. And quantum physics is the terma that's helping us to to cure our one-sidedness. Now, an example of a terma in Tibetan Buddhism, there's a terma, and I'll essentialize the teaching of a whole 100-page book, hundreds of pages, and in 4 words, and the 4 words are, as viewed, so appears. Okay, this is an actual equation for how we create reality. Think about a dream. As you view the dream has no choice but to instantaneously, in no time at all, will appear, because your viewing and the way it appears are not separate. Remember, there are not 2 separate things interacting in a quantum universe. Well, as viewed, so appears is such a profound equation of how we create reality. If somebody hears about this and says, oh, as viewed, so appears, that's BS, that's not true. Well, then the whole universe will give them evidence confirming that it's not true. And then they'll, feel like, you see, I've been proven right, without realizing, no, the universe is teaching them, it's showing them the profundity of as viewed, so appears, but they're misinterpreting it. They're not seeing it. You see, the universe is continually teaching us, but in a way that we're not prepared for.
Oh man, that is really good. And that lives up to your own rule about that something complex should be, given a five letter, a 5 word phrase. So
Yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Oh,
And the thing I want to say about that 5 word phrase, I've come up with a 5 word, and I think it's 5 words. Life is but a dream. That would be, the row, merrily, merrily row your boat type of thing. That would be my 5 word offering.
oh, so great. I'm just curious about what you said something in there about the compensatory effect. Are you saying that one person could then have this vision that because the balance has tipped in one direction, or are you saying that more people would have a certain kind of vision?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this like one brain, one global brain, with 8 billion of us humans, all just sort of cells in that greater organism. And, when any, like, this one person gets off balance, the unconscious compensates and sends them dreams or symbols in the dream. And interesting, the symbols are the language of dreams, and quantum physics is a purely symbolic procedure. It's very, very interesting. So if one person gets off balance, they'll have a dream compensating, showing them the other side. And if they take in the symbol and really resonate with it, it'll get them back in balance. What I'm pointing out is that, yeah, that's a process happening in an individual that also very well might be happening collectively as a species, you
That's
know?
what I heard. That's pretty amazing. That's what I heard, that you're saying that that's maybe actually happening in society as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's happening in the collective unconscious of our species, because think about it, with all the horrors that are going on with Ukraine and Gaza and just endless, they're like, on the one hand, there are people who just dissociate and can't even deal with it. And, because it would be too much. And I understand that. But then there are people who are actually able to take in the insanity and the horror, and it will consolate some sort of deeper insight in themselves. And they all of a sudden might get creative, might express, a new idea. And because I point out that one of the things that quantum physics is offering us, it's actually unlocking our creative nature. Because if I can just take a step back, with this mind virus that's at the bottom, I've written 3 books about it, that's at the bottom of the madness that's going on in our world and the evil. All that means is that the origin and the solution of our collective madness is to be found within our psyche, and that's a no-brainer. But one of the things I'll say is like, oh yeah, the antidote and the best protection for this mind virus is to actually be in touch with our true nature. Well, great, but what does that mean? That's such a cliche. What does it mean to be in touch with our true nature? And I point out, well, when you have the realization of your nature, what is your nature? Your nature is, by definition, creative. And so when you have realization of your nature, you embody and express yourself creatively. And the more you do that, the deepen your realization of your nature in a positive feedback loop that creates light upon light. And that's why I'm continually pointing out that the solution for our world crises, and quantum physics is showing us this, is to connect with being creative. And any one of us being creative in whatever medium, even the way we walk, the way we wash dishes, that can be creative, but any one of us connecting with our creative nature in a way clears that pathway in the collective unconscious, making it that much more probable that other people will also be able to access that, because quantum physics, in a sense, is showing us is shedding light on the imagination of the separate self, is showing, no, we don't exist separate, not only from the universe, but from each other. And that we have this enormous creative power. It's like this incredibly, this magical amulet or talisman has fallen from the heavens, and we're in possession of it, but we don't even know what to do with it. And that's what quantum physics is really offering us. And just as somebody who's not a physicist, not indoctrinated or programmed or conditioned or trained academically, I just realized, oh my God, once I began to discover, to study quantum physics, this was describing what happened to me in 1981, because it was like I had a quantum shift, and I fell into a universe where things that I had told were impossible, that could only happen in a dream, were happening
Was it
again. And what's that?
in a dream?
No, were happening in my waking dream. Things that were completely physically impossible. And I didn't realize at that point that I was having a revelation. It's taken me over 40 years of like trying to integrate, because just to go back to that terma, the hidden treasure thing that I was talking about, when the person discovers a terma in Tibetan Buddhism, they typically say, if it's a new way to become awake, to become enlightened, it's a new practice, the person who discovers it has to do the practice, maybe even for years, before they have realization. And then they're in the position to share the terma with the community in a way where it then transmits to other people. And in a way, I haven't discovered any terma. Quantum physics itself, like I'm saying, that people before me, it's like a modern day analog to a terma. But as I more and more integrate my own trauma and wounding and take in and assimilate, oh my God, quantum physics is describing to a T precisely this universe that I had discovered, that the psychiatrists years ago were just saying, oh, you're mentally ill. As I more and more am able to metabolize the realization that is quantum physics, the revelation that is quantum physics, I think the more I'm able to just, like we're doing now, just spontaneously trip out on it and be able to transmit it to people. And then it becomes contagious, just like the mind virus is contagious in a negative way, and it creates a collective psychosis. When people get switched on to what quantum physics is showing us, it becomes contagious, and it can go viral, and it can change everything.
Yeah, because it's so hopeful, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I feel like if we were talking about the opposite of hope, that's the sort of thing you were describing, with some psychiatrist telling you that what you experience is because you're wrong, right? That you're sick. The whole pathologizing theme within.
Yeah, yeah. And to give you an example how hopeful quantum physics is, so they were trying to describe what is the microstructure, what are the building blocks of this physical universe. And they discovered, oh, it's nothing physical, it's consciousness. And they came up with this term like an elementary particle, right? And the way they describe these elementary particles, they would say, oh yeah, this is the building block of the whole physical universe. And these elementary particles, they exist in a state of potentiality, where every and any state they could ever possibly exist in, they exist in this open-ended possibility state. And the moment that an observer comes along, all of a sudden, one of those possibilities actualizes by the way it was observed, right? And all the other ones just vaporize into parallel worlds. And that process is happening again and again and again, each and every moment. The point is this. The point is that if one of those possibilities, and this is a quote of a founding father of quantum physics, is even highly, ridiculously improbable, it can still manifest in this very next moment. Now, to bring that into the reality, into real world, that's to say that the possibility that a sufficient number of our species could awaken and could come together in a way and actually make a difference in our world and avert the myriad world crises that we are conjuring up together. Quantum physics is saying that's completely and utterly in the realm of the possible. And if you're not thinking that, if you're all pessimistic, you're part of the problem. If you're not thinking that, if you're not envisioning that as that we actually can awaken, then what in the world are you thinking?
Yeah, whatever you've been told, right? But
Yeah.
but that is really hopeful. And I'm thinking, when you say the observer, that is what influences that's the potential, and then there's the observer, right? And so would you say that it's our identity that determines which of the paths to go, which of the timelines, or whatever you want, parallel realities you were talking about?
Yeah, well, what that identity is a really interesting thing, because like I was saying, one of the founding fathers was saying, well, what science is really about, the ultimate question is, who are we? And when quantum physics is really helping to shed light on that. And like going back to that mind virus, the real like essence of how I describe it is that it's an identification with a fictitious identity, with a separate self. And as soon as I identify that I exist as like an ego in space and time, then I'm going to spend and I'm going to invest the rest of my life force and my energy defending that ego and protecting that ego. And the absurdity is it doesn't even exist in the way you've been imagining it. And that energy could have been channeled into love and compassion and creativity, but yet you're actually, investing all of it in defending and protecting, your sense of self. That's the madness. That's the mind virus. And quantum physics is actually helping us to see through that. Because when you discover that there's nothing objective, the other half of that realization is that, oh, I don't exist in the way I've been imagining I do. If I imagine I exist as a separate self, then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I'm actually at one with everything. I'm actually interconnected with other people, with all sentient species, with the whole universe. I'm interconnected and interdependent. We're all, and that's all of our nature, like I don't exist as a separate self. I only exist in having relation to you. It's a relational thing, but you don't exist as a separate self. You only exist in relation to other beings who only exist relative. There's no like fixed identity anywhere, and that's when you begin to tap into who we are, who we actually are, and like I'm saying, the expression of that is an open heart, is love, compassion. That is our nature, is love and compassion, and all of a sudden is being creative. It's kind of why whenever I do these interviews, I don't ever prepare or memorize or anything. No, I've just learned that, oh no, I could just like trust to plug in and get out of my own way, and whatever is getting dreamed up and wants to come through comes through, and it always seems to work out.
It sure does right now, for sure. And I feel like what you just said is back to that question about, oh, when something is very real and small for me, I have to make it to work, and I have to do all of these things, versus, just also being aware of, I'm not remembering your words correctly, but the liminal space, or the transcendent um, part of reality. So, and that's actually what you're saying here with add-ons to it, right? It's making even more sense as you say it
Yeah, and
now.
I should just point out, when people hear about quantum physics and it seems so intimidating and complicated, I think of Einstein. I mean, Einstein himself, who was one of the founding fathers, he actually has a quote. He says, well, first off, he would joke that people who study quantum physics are just insane, because he can never fully, he wasn't able to wrap his mind around what quantum physics was showing us, because quantum physics was showing us that there's no objective world. And all of science was based on the idea that there was an objective world, and Einstein could never let go of that. So he actually did say, he goes, yeah, quantum physics is so uncommonly important that it should be everyone's concern. You see, and that's what I'm trying to get at with my work, that this is like a huge radical breakthrough. And this can change everything. This can heal our planet. And other quantum physicists say, oh, it's an incredible pity that not more just ordinary people are aware of quantum physics. One quantum physicist says, you know, when I get really depressed, two things are my go-to. One is I'll listen to like classical music, like Beethoven, and the other is I'll read quantum physics. Those are my antidepressants. Now, but it sounds really complicated, but it's not, because I think it's the biggest chapter in the quantum book. You know, and keep in mind this fall a new version, a new and expanded edition of the quantum, you know, book is coming out, because I've had further downloads. But I think the biggest chapter is everyday reality, that we experience the world of quantum physics way more than we do with Newtonian classical physics. And I'll give you an example, like a real life example. You know, I was talking about those elementary particles who exist in a superposition of state in every possible state they ever could. Well, just think about us. Think about, oh, when I'm with you, the Paul that gets evoked is different than when I'm with that person. Or, you know, we all have multiple selves depending on the situation. Oh, now I'm the teacher. Oh, now I'm the student. Oh, now I'm the employee. You know, now I'm the brother, the father, the son, whatever. There are these different roles that get brought up. So here's the example. A number of years ago, I was in a long-term relationship with somebody, and we broke up, but I was still living in the house. And one morning I was sleeping, and my ex-girlfriend at this point, she woke me up to ask me a question, but she was afraid that I was going to say no, right? And so I'm completely asleep, and she woke me up asking me the question, and I remember really clearly, it was like she woke up the part of, and the way she asked the question, afraid I was going to say no, it invoked the part of me that did say no, which then confirmed to her, oh, you see, I was right. He really, you know, whatever, you know, wasn't going to support me in this way. But at that moment, for some reason, I was lucid and I saw, oh, she easily could have woken up the part of me that would have said yes, but she didn't do that. She, you know, woke up the part of me that was like going to say no, which just confirmed to her concretization of who I was. But that's an example that in our relationships, we're continually dreaming people up each and every moment. Some people we project the shadow onto, and the more we project the shadow onto them, you know, we're not causing the shadow to manifest, but it's making it more probable that then that shadow part in them will manifest. And as soon as it does, now we have proof that they really are shadowy. So we get more fixed in our viewpoint of projecting a shadow. You know, that's an example. Or if we're with somebody who just sees our beauty and embraces us and accepts us and sees our light, it's making it way more probable that that light part of us will show up. That's all based on quantum physics. That's like a real life example of how quantum physics, it informs our every moment of our day.
Amazing. Right. Okay. Yeah, I see that. And I feel like all through this conversation, what you're saying is pointing towards compassion, right? Away from the little self towards more compassion. Because when we have that for ourselves and other people, then, you know, people can shine more. We can shine more, right?
Right. It helps us. And the thing about compassion, it's not like this, you know, like there's only so much of it. It's like a limited energy that if we give away compassion, oh no, then I won't have that much. No, the more compassion we give and express, the more compassion that we have access to. It just endlessly, you know, self-generates. And so the point is that yeah, things are really bleak and they look dire in our world. And you know, I think there's a French saying, let's see if I can remember it, something like, oh yeah, this is no time for pessimism. I'll save that for better times, you know. And the idea being that yeah, if we get hooked by despair and pessimism, then we're part of the problem. You know, and here what I'm trying to point out, you know, I mean, just if you can forget the math and the technology and, you know, just the actual, you know, that quantum physics is a revelation. It's showing us something. And what it's showing us is that we already possess the solution to our world crises. All of us, we already have it, but we don't know we have it, you know? And all I'm trying to do is just help people to see that in a way, help people to open their eyes and see the reality of our situation.
Paul Levy, I've looked at your birth chart and I don't know what role astrology can have in this metaphysic conversation, but it sure has meaning for me. And what I'm especially noticing, well, now you just mentioned the thing about downloading and just speaking spontaneously. You do have the moon in Gemini, which is really good for that. But what I've been noticing is the sun. You have the sun, your Virgo. That's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good. But the sun is conjunct Jupiter, and that is really wanting to make meaning. So it's not enough with the analysis, the rationality, which is in the Virgo, right? Can be very technical and understanding technical stuff. It's also the meaning making. It has to make sense and searching for something that is of a higher order, right? Searching for the next frontier, you would say about Jupiter, searching for what is out there. So I feel that's really grand in your chart. What do you feel about astrology and about what I just said?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really interesting to me. And that maps on. I mean, I've always had this sense of like, what is this? Just being alive. And this is a miracle. And what is this about? And I remember, my best friend growing up, who then became a solid, solid state physicist, I think it's called. And he was very much a scientific materialist, even though he was like, A plus plus at every class he ever took. He was such a genius in the realm of mind. But I remember him saying, "Oh, but if you can't understand something, why even put any energy there?" Where for me, no, if something was a mystery, that's where my attention really got activated. And so, I'm not an astrologer, but I'm very open to astrology. I have a lot of astrologer friends, and it makes me think of, one of the things that I've experienced again and again and again that I keep on trying to transmit is that this universe is an oracle. And, it's a living oracle and it's speaking symbolically, and symbols are the language of dreams. And, and it really depends, its effect on us. Do we have the eyes to see, to decipher the clues and to become fluent in the language
What
that
you
the
also,
dreams.
that's a question from before, is that what you're also saying is just like in a dream, when we want to interpret our dream, nightly dream, we should interpret in symbols like that. Is that a part of what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah. Like this is not even my work. I mean, but I'm super into that. In his work, Jung himself spent his whole life, and he continually talks about this of trying to, get across what he called having symbolic awareness. And symbolic awareness is just like you were just saying, just like interpreting. You have a dream at night, you wake up, you interpret the dream, oh, what is that dream showing me? What is the symbolism? You know, what is the meaning? All of those, different questions in the same way that whatever's happening in our life, we can then, hold it in a way like we're seeing a dream, and oh wow, and it becomes very playful. You don't want to take yourself too seriously. It's not a literal thing, it's symbolic, but the point is that it expands your awareness, and it becomes very, very fun, and it can give you incredible insight into what the universe is trying to communicate to you.
Amazing, amazing. Our hour is up. I just want to say that what you just said there, that is all a very Jupiter thing, a Jupiterian thing. And when you have something, when you have a planet conjunct your sun, it's a huge deal. It's like a big part of who you are because the sun is our sense of who we are.
Right.
So that's really a wonderful way of saying everyone has a Jupiter, right? It's just a matter of how much in touch with it we are, and it is that making meaning and looking a little closer
Yeah,
at
yeah.
scope of things. Okay, Paul Levy, I promised you only an hour, so it's up. And thank you so much for being.
Oh, totally. It's my pleasure and honor. I just really appreciate, being able to talk with you. So thank you.